Hello and welcome to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. I'm Steve Smith, your host, and I'm going to give this one a title. I'm calling it a Christmas edition. I'm excited about this interview and I hope you are too. This is episode number 36. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I thought it about time that I go in search across the country and see if I can hunt down, if you will, friend of the podcast, Tony Ellis, the Nomadic golfer. And so we come up to a point where I've managed to find him. It's really an interview that I've been wanting to bring to you, and a really good chat and catch up with Tony. So hopefully over the next few weeks while you're on holiday, some of you get a chance to get away, maybe do a little bit of travel. This interview might give you a few locations that you might think of and say to yourself, let's go. I'm going to go and find out and go and play that golf course that I heard from Tony. He made it sound pretty good. It sounded like a good experience. So it's a few tips here, something that hopefully you'll enjoy the conversation. I know I did, and hopefully you'll be able to take a few things away from it and go and enjoy something a little bit different of golf throughout Australia. And with no further ado, let's get stuck into it. Here is Tony Ellis, the Nomadic golfer. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a slight deviation here from some of the news segments with Walking the Fairways and the Keeper of the Green segments. And I'm going to go to our travel segment that I've done in the past. And we're catching up with the one and only Tony Ellis, the Nomadic golfer. Tony, welcome back to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast.
Thank you, Steve. Great to be back. Great to have you under you.
Mate, it's really interested to talk to you second time around. It's been, I think it was early March or sometime in March earlier in the year that we first caught up, and you'd done 100 courses in 12 months or something along those lines. It was quite impressive. You did do that. Is that what it was? It was 100, wasn't it?
Yeah, in 2020, I played exactly 100.
In 12 months' time?
Yep. So mostly New South Wales last year, and probably was a pretty strange year to try to get out and do that. But, yep, so we did that last year and we've tried to do it again this year.
So for anyone, mate, is it very impressive, very impressive. For any first-time listeners to this one and you haven't had a chance to go down the back catalogue and find that episode with Tony, played 100 courses in the year 2020, quite incredible, travelling around throughout a difficult time for most, but you managed to achieve that goal. And here you are going through a similar scenario again of trying to do it again. Mate, I wanted to catch up with you to talk about your travels, but in this time around in the year 2021, mate, let's put that on pause for a second because I'm going to do something a little bit different here. You ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'm going to fire Steve's Super 7 questions at you for a change. This is a first.
I better get off the fence.
Mate, I thought I'd try something totally different because the questions, and you may have heard of it, I'm sure our listeners have heard it with the different superintendents as I go through Keeper of the Greens, but I'm interested thinking about it to hear what a golfer, certainly someone who's traveling like yourself throughout the country, to see what some of your quick response answers will be to these questions. So let's get it going. Are you ready to go?
I'm raring to go.
All right, mate, let's go. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
Sunrise. It's still the time for a golfer to get out there in the early mornings.
Yeah, I'm not up as early as you greenkeepers, but I'm out there 95% of my games of golf before 8 o'clock.
There you go, mate. Very, very good to hear. I like it. All right. Stripes or no stripes on fairways?
I've waxed and waned a bit with this over the years, but I'm no stripes. I'm a bit of a traditionalist in that sense.
Okay, interesting. Good to hear. Good to hear the differences. This is coming from a golfer. I like it. Lean or lush in your travels, mate? What are your thoughts?
Oh, I'm a lean. Love the natural aspect of the different Aussie sort of outlooks. And if it's a bit lean and a bit browny in the summer, I like that.
Very good to hear. And you've seen plenty. That we do know. We do know. Now, this one's for a little bit of grass type stuff. And you're traveling around, so we know that you're experiencing many, many different types. And I think you're probably starting to learn some of those different types and what they are. So let's go bent grass. This is for green surface. So bent grass, couch grass,
or something else if you've played something else? What are your thoughts?
Definitely bent on the greens for me.
Nice. It's nice, smooth. I think they do.
Bit of my South Australian background coming through.
Well, but it's a good choice. I think that no one will argue with that. No one will probably argue with any of them, but that's your preference, so that's good to hear. Now, a preferred place to play, not to look after, of course, because you're not a greenkeeper. A preferred place to play, are we talking cool climate or warm climate? What's your preference?
I might come back to that bloody local South Australian piece too, which it was really interesting to listen to Nathan Bennett talk about the Royal Adelaide situation, how it looks distinctly different over those 4 different seasons of the year.
Yep.
So that climate, that warm climate that has the 4 seasons, is where I actually think is a great place to play.
Very nice. I'm going to throw one at you now with regards to bunkers, and we're going to say, what is your preferred bunker style as a player? What do you like to look at? What do you like to be challenged by? And we're going to go with a multiple choice. St Andrews with the pot reveted face style bunkers. Kingston Heath, as we know, the beautiful broad style Australian landscape, roughy, sharp edge, that sort of thing. Or the bright and shiny, as I call it, Augusta National. What are your thoughts?
I'm an Aussie sandbelt. Kingston Heath every time in that regard for me.
There you go. Very nice. And one final one, mate, a little bit of a twist on this because you're a golfer. Where, if you could go anywhere tomorrow to play a golf course, anywhere in the world, which one would you want to play?
If you'd asked me 3 years ago, I definitely would have said St Andrews, but I have had the privilege of playing there. Here we go. I'm going to say Barnbougle.
Oh, wow. There we go. And we'll allude to where you are at the moment very shortly, but there you go. Barnbougle is the one that you want to go to tomorrow. And that, well, maybe. Thank you for being part of the Super 7. Slightly different, slightly altered, and I'm very impressed by your answers, mate. And look, let's just go there. We'll segue straight from what you just mentioned there as Barnbougle being the one you want to go to tomorrow. We're catching up with you right now. You're in Tasmania, which is where Barnbougle is located, in the northeastern tip of Tassie. Mate, we come to you. We're chatting away. Whereabouts are you in Australia, in Tasmania? Where are you right now?
Yeah, I'm actually halfway down the east coast. We've been in Tassie for 6 weeks, and obviously we're travelling with the car and the caravan, so we come in at Devonport, smack bang on the north coast, travelled from Devonport to the northwest tip, and then sort of jagged in and out the west coast through central sort of highlands. Played Ratho Farm a couple of days ago.
Oh, nice.
On our way back to Launceston, saw that there were a couple of warm days coming, and the beauty about Tassie is nothing's too far away, so we've just taken a bit of a detour into the east coast for 4 or 5 days, try to get some sun and some warmth before meeting up with our family over Christmas at Launceston. So
very nice.
Yep. So 6 weeks in here, I've played 15 courses in Tassie. Plan to be here till the beginning of April. So on that rate, I should get over 50 courses under me belt in Tassie.
Wow, mate, that's very, very impressive indeed. And I don't know. I've spoken with other travellers similar to you in Lock and Leash from Finding Fairways Australia who have been travelling around, and I remember they went to Northern Territory, and I know that there's 11 golf courses in the Northern Territory. I don't know how many you've got in Tassie. You're there for a while. So do you know how many you've got to pick from down there in Tassie?
I think there's around 80. A guy who I talk a bit with came to me the other day and said there's 87.
Wow.
So one really interesting thing about Tassie golf, which I had no clue about, is, say there's 87 courses. There's only about a dozen of them that are 18-hole golf courses. The rest are all 9-holes.
Right. Wow, that's interesting.
It's a really big slant in the 9 holes favour there, which is a bit different.
That's very interesting. I know some of the stuff that you've been posting recently on Instagram, and that's at the Nomadic Golfer. Is that right? That's your handle on Instagram?
Yep, Nomadic _golfer, yep.
Yep, there you go. Incidentally, while we're talking, what's your website, mate, so we can see where these reviews are at length as well?
Oh, yeah, that's a Australian Golf Course Tour by Caravan.com.
There you go. Very easy to remember.
Yeah.
So
it's a different feel about it down here, but having those 9-hole courses for a traveller is fantastic. You can, play a couple of them in a day if they're a couple of close together, and nothing's too far away down here apart from in the west coast a bit. So it's it really makes it easy to play a lot of golf with all these 9-holers, and most of the tracks where I've been playing at this time of year, especially down the west there, I get a job to see anyone on the course. So if you want to play 18 holes, just walking around once and playing 2 balls to play 18 holes like that, you'll be done and dusted in, 2 of you within 2 hours. It's pretty easy way to get a fair bit of golf in.
Very much so. Like you mentioned, with those 9-hole, so many 9-hole options, probably quite easy to come across plenty of them that are nearby each other, I suppose. But like you said, I'm interested because some of like I said, the latest posts you've done on Instagram, some of those pictures, you've found some pretty unique courses in some lovely countryside down there in that northwest. More recently, some of those little 9-hole ones up the side of mountains, some incredible views. Tell us a little bit about some of those tracks.
Yeah, another really the days that you enjoy the most. Two of them in particular are both courses in small towns in remote areas in the west. One in Rosebery, which is an old mining town, and the other in Tarraleah, which is an old hydro power town, which now has a permanent, a resident population of 0. Both of those places, you hardly see anyone around. You rock up to the golf course, there's no one there, and just the beauty of the place with the mature old trees, and that's the first thing that hits you is the natural beauty of the surrounds, which carries through to the golf course. And with those 2 courses in particular, the thing that you don't see when you first get there, but you find as you uncover hole by hole, is someone who knew what they were doing designed those golf courses, because combine that beauty with the really interesting layouts and quirky little designs. They're really good fun courses to play. Those 2 in particular, they're so photogenic because of those old mature gums that just dominate the landscape. They're beautiful, beautiful places to play golf. You have to have the right attitude to play there, though. Some of those places struggle to grow grass. They're under snow for a certain time of the year. It rains a lot. They don't get much sun. So growing good greens in particular is really tough for them. And I reckon, they'd only have a 2 or 3 month window of the year when their greens, they'd be really happy with the greens. The rest of the year, they're really working hard on it. And they're only volunteers who look after the courses as well. But those 2 stand out, and they're not the only ones by any means. The volunteers around here in Tassie do a great job, but those 2 really captured my imagination. Yeah, so there are a couple of the 9-holers. There's like, it seems like every country town has a good 9-hole course around here, so it's great for travelling. Having said that, in the 15 courses I've played, there's only been 2 18-holers. One is Ratho Farm, which I think you've probably talked about on your podcast before, and you could probably devote 2 podcast sessions to talking about Ratho. The history.
To be honest, I haven't played there myself. I know people who have. I know that it's obviously that it's titled as the oldest. I think it's the oldest golf course in Australia, if I'm not mistaken. Is one of their claims?
Yep, that's the claim, and even the guy because they have the Australian Golf History Museum in the town where Ratho Farm is in Bothwell. And even the guy I was talking to in there says, we're a bit coy to claim that. We do say it's the longest running golf course in Australia. He thinks it might have been perhaps the second oldest, but whatever the oldest was, has had a discontinued or a break in operation somewhere. So anyway, I think we call it the oldest, and it's a fascinating place. It's on a working farm.
Yep.
And it's got so many quirky things about it, but it is just so interesting. It's just great entertainment. You never know what to expect from that.
And that, no doubt, is part of the charm of the place as well. I know they've got I'm pretty certain they've got a nice whiskey distillery nearby as well.
Yeah. I think Greg Ramsey, whose family owns it, and he's been the man behind sort of rejuvenating it and getting all the publicity it's getting. I think he has something to do with that distillery as well. But they really do it well there. They've kept like the feel of the old farm buildings, and they use some of those for accommodation. And there's the old homestead is like the clubhouse, and you walking in the kitchen, and they do a really good job. The general manager there's a guy called Peter Luke, and he adds to the experience. He's a smart but very laconic, hospitable guy who adds to your experience there. It's a great experience. Anyone who's coming to Tassie to play golf should not miss out on Ratho.
Yeah, I think it's an important place to visit. You're dead right.
Don't expect beautifully manicured and maintained surfaces. That's not what it's about. It's fine, but it's more about the history of the place. The fact that the 18 holes, even though 4 of them were only built in the last 10 years, it is the original 18-hole plan that was mapped out in the 1820s, and it is such good fun. There's some quirky stuff from the very first hole, which is I think it's about 160 metre par 3, and it takes you 5 minutes to find where the pin is, looking over farm gates, little buildings. There's plenty of that goes on. It's very interesting. It's good. It's a great experience.
It certainly sounds like it. I'm sure plenty of people have heard of Ratho Farm, and whether they've been there or not, I think it's on the list of places to play. Certainly when you travel to Tasmania, no doubt. You touched on the claim of it being the oldest or whatever. I've heard, ifs, buts or maybes and all sorts of stuff. So I like to leave that to one side. We know it's very old, if nothing else, extremely old. So that in itself, and like you say, the quirks of and it's got square greens with fences and that sort of thing, I think, as well from memory. So an interesting, wonderful place to enjoy.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. The only other 18-hole course that I've played so far up on the northwest coast called Ulverston, and that was only built in the 1970s and carved out of an old gum forest, and that's a magnificent aesthetic as well. It's one of those places where you see that the ball in its flight against the massive trees, and that echoing sound of the driver on the ball is a great sound. It's just that real crack in that amphitheatre type feeling. And it's a beautiful track. I think in most rankings it ranks about 6 or 7 in Tasmania, even with the big 4 in Barnbougles and King Island courses these days. So that's a great track too.
There you go. Very, very interesting, mate. Good to hear. Now let's talk a little bit about prior to Tassie. You spent a bit of time in South Australia, which is your home state. Is that correct?
Yep. I was born and bred in McLaren Vale, now south of Adelaide, and then lived up on the Murray for most of the 90s. So it was great to be able to spend about 6 months in SA, and got to play all the old tracks I played at as a kid, and got to play, I reckon, about 15 or 20 courses that I hadn't played before as well. So that was fantastic.
What were some of the highlights of those courses? And I'm curious, I always liked it. This is a personal thing that I've done when you play courses and you remember them from when you were a kid to when you go back 10, 20 years later, how they've changed. So tell us some of your highlights down there in SA, but also I want to hear, I think it was Victor Harbour's one of the ones that I think you've talked about before to me early on. So what's changed about some of those courses that surprised you as well? I'm curious.
Geez, I could talk for 3 hours about this. I suppose I break it into a couple of different things. Hey, as a kid, I learnt golf at Victor Harbour in a place called Ashbourne, a little 9-hole, almost like picnic course, beautiful setting. Used to have sheep running over the course in the summer, and you only played in the winter. The condition of that's gone way, has improved remarkably. It's still just a beautiful place to go and play golf out in the forest. Victor Harbour I don't think much has changed from my perspective of that golf course from when I was a kid. Magnificent layout, tough, tight. First 10 or 12 holes as good as you'll find, and still a fantastic experience to play golf at Victor Harbour. Still has that tee shot from the first, which Gary Player reckons is the best view from a first tee anywhere in the world, which is a big statement.
That's a big goal.
So those two are always part of staple golf for me whenever I go back. Interestingly, I listened to your podcast the other day with Nathan Bennett from Royal Adelaide. One of the real benefits of spending 6 months in Adelaide is I got to have 6 or 7 games around Royal Adelaide.
Oh, stop it.
Yeah, and I know your love affair with that joint. So,
mate, I haven't played
it. Yeah, so that was fantastic. And it was really interesting to listen to Nathan talking about how that course looks and plays different through those distinct different seasons in South Australia's season. And I got to experience, through that from the middle of summer through there to the start of, or the end of winter, I suppose. And yeah, it does change a lot. And my love affair with that course continues. I just love the par fours around that place. There's some iconic holes there, which you never get sick of playing.
Absolutely. And how did you find speak of Royal Adelaide, and on the back of, recently chatting with Nathan, you talk about the seasons. What was it that was different? Did you find the course firmed up or was softer, or was the aesthetic appearance of the course? How was it different?
A couple of things. The way the rough changes from the different seasons to from the wispy to the thick. And it all makes sense to me when Nathan says they never cut it. They just let it do what nature has. The greens are always pretty quick. Might have been early March. They were firm as and really made it really tough. The surfaces were just superb, but so firm you really had to nip those irons well to hold. And that sort of obviously died off a bit as the year progressed and it got a bit wetter and softer. But not soft by any means, but not like that firm hard like we've seen Royal Melbourne on the TV over the years, etc. It was like that, so it really tested you out, hitting in the right spots. So that was great. Well, one of the other really unique experiences about spending that time in South Australia, we went up north in South Australia, did the Unadata track.
Oh, wow.
William Creek Hotel, which has got a little golf course attached, but we won't talk about that. That's just dust bowl. But playing Cooper Pedy is an interesting experience.
How I don't know if bizarre's right. I have played Cooper Pedy once, and I was much younger, but it is quite an experience, so different from even just another deserty style course. It's so unique.
Yeah, I've played lots of courses with the sand scrapes with the black oil in them, but this course is unique. Yeah, instead of having a fairway mower, they have a grader which just grades the rocks, and it's in a weird way. Some of those holes are beautiful. The fairways are white. Yeah, you've got this little patch of green for the synthetic turf that you tee off. The white fairways, the brown rough with a bit of salt bush in it, and then the little black scrape on the end. It's just a beautiful contrast of colours. Not what you expect on a golf course.
And like you say, the fairways are white. Like I remember, like it was a long time ago that I played there, but I remember it being so almost iridescently bright.
Yep.
Because the ground is white. It's a really odd thing to be looking down. And is the first tee still above? Isn't it on top of the clubhouse or something like that?
Built like a man-made hill, and they plonked the first tee up on top of that hill. Yeah,
and it's got a hell of a view, and that's your starting hole.
Yep. It would have been September when we played there. It wasn't too hot. It might have been 30, but the sun was out. And trying to see a white ball against those white fairways was tough. It was a good time to get the orange ball out, I reckon, playing around there.
Very, very unusual, no doubt. And And that's not local to anywhere near Adelaide and in that sort of southern reaches of the state. You talked about up the Oodnadatta, and that's a trip in itself.
Yeah, it's 6-7 hours north of Adelaide. Yeah, it's a big trek out.
And so that's some of your stuff in South Australia through earlier this year.
Yep, 6 months there. So we actually spent about 5 months south of Adelaide playing, around your Victor Harbour, Ashbourne, and a couple of really good tracks south of Adelaide in Lady Bay and Mount Compass.
Yes.
If you're travelling to South Australia, you've got to get to those two as well. So we spent 5 months around there. So playing the Adelaide courses, we got to Kooyonga and Grange. Didn't get to Glenelg this time, but have played there before. And then on our way out to come here to Tassie, we went up the north and did the Coober Pedy, and then came back in through the Barossa. Played 3 good courses there. Hadn't played Sandy Creek or Tanunda there before. They were both great tracks to have a hit on if you're touring around South Australia. Then up on the Murray, where I lived through the 90s, and that's good golfing country too. Centred around Barmera, got good golf courses at Barmera, Loxton, Waikerie and Berry, all with that sort of Kalgoorlie Broken Hill look on the golf course in that red sand off of the grown surfaces. So it gives you that really good contrast of the lush green fairways and greens against that, the red sand. It's a great look for me, and I like that. And those courses have all got character and are all tough tests of golf. So golfing up in that region's pretty good. And then on the way here, the last stop was down the southeast of South Australia, around Mount Gambier, Millicent, Narracourt. And that's a really strong golfing region. They've in South Australian like country championships and amateur stakes, they breed a lot of good golfers down there, and I can see why there's some good, tough golf courses around there. That Millicent, probably the pick of them, and not dissimilar to Ulverston in Tassie that I was talking about. It was carved out of an old gum forest, and you feel you're in the middle of nowhere. You feel like you're in a planet of your own. You're 20 minutes out from town of Millicent. You're driving in amongst all these forests, and you come across a golf course, and it's beautiful out there. It's a great track, tough, not narrow fairways, but a bit like the old course on the National. If you've got plenty of room to hit it, but if you miss it, you just reload.
Fantastic, mate. And that, like you said, that southern end around the Mount Gambier, Millicent, all that, it's probably an area that we don't often really talk about much in terms of a little golfing destination down there either so much. But it, like you said, you found some courses that are good areas to play and enjoy.
Yep, absolutely. I've played at Mount Gambier before, and that's a fantastic layout. Got some beautiful views, just a sort of 10 minutes out of town. But I hadn't played the others before, and as I said, Millicent's fantastic. Narracourt's a really quality golf course too, and I played other couple of country courses in Lucendale and Keith, and they don't have the sort of dollars to get the surfaces beautiful, but they've got old classic layouts, and so 5 days of golf there was really good.
Now, mate, I'm certainly intrigued by all of those travels so far. You said now through South Australia and Tassie. Did you mention that this year you'd done some, since we last spoke, you'd sort of done a little bit finishing off in New South Wales there? Yep.
So start of the year up on a farm near Gundagai. So as we came down into SA, we headed a little north before we took the west strip and down into SA. So we played across Parkes, Forbes, Nyngan, Cobar.
Oh, yeah.
That was really interesting. Parkes and Forbes, pretty good tracks, and I think Forbes has had some publicity about the quality of its golf course, and even some of those, like I said, Cobar and Nyngan, they're pretty keen on their golf out there in the middle of nowhere, and there is the Coober Pedy equivalent in New South Wales is a place called
Whitecliffs,
and that is an experience. That is one step further on the bazaar than Coober Pedy.
that really now when we're talking remote places, mate, that is I know Coober Pedy's remote, but they've got somewhat of a population. Whitecliffs has much less.
Yeah, I think especially I played there in the middle of January. Where I think the population's about 30. It might swell in the winter when some get up there and get stuck into the opals, but that is a really unique place. Some of the fairways, they're not even really fairways, but they have this, because the same as Cooper Pedy, you have to hit off your own little turf mat that you carry around. But some of the fairways are just full of saltbush, and they have the local rule, wherever your ball is, if you can find it, you can move it 2 club lengths and put it on your mat. So that involves pulling it out of the saltbush. So, interesting place and a unique place. And then we played at Broken Hill as well. So they got the country club at Broken Hill, which is really nice track, and as I was saying before about Barmer and those Riverland courses, the lush green against the red sand, and it's a really good design at Broken Hill. And they've got a Cooper Pedy type track at South Broken Hill as well, which I see my mate Finding Fairways played only a couple of days ago.
Yes.
Where you've got to carry your mat around as well. So that was our little New South Wales stint before we got into South Australia at the late January, early February, I think.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Oh, well, that's made very... Look, you've covered... That's a hell of a lot of country you covered. I'm sure in these sorts of trips, and this is a random question, I don't know, have you got some sort of count of how many Ks you've done so far?
Yeah, we've only done in the 2 years less than 70,000 Ks, but
that's a lot of distance in terms of not driving around and around in a city. That's just a lot across the country.
Yeah, if you tracked on a map where we've been, there's a few circles in there. There's a funny couple of years with border closures and what have you. It's not very textbook, but we've sort of our plan was to not have a plan, and that's suited perfectly.
It's going very well.
Yeah, we've done a lot of wandering.
Very, very good, mate. It's like I said, impressive stuff. I love hearing. I've been fortunate when I was younger. Family, we travelled around a lot of the country, all over the country, actually, by car. So I know a lot of these places, and I'm just having flashbacks as when I was a kid. You know, we stopped in and saw different golf courses, and in our travels, it'd be like, "What's that one over there?" Whilst we may not have played them, I remember the townships, and I remember the drive. I quite remember the drive into Broken Hill, because we did that a number of times heading across the country. And it's just a really, it's sort of, there's a point where it just sort of changes. It becomes a little bit hilly, I think, from memory, as you're coming across from Wilcannia. And then you're just like, oh, I can see why it's kind of mining country, if that makes sense. It sort of just comes out of nowhere.
Yep. And it's a great place, Broken Hill, to spend some time. Lots of history, lots of really interesting things to see.
Indeed, there is, mate. I love the travelling concept of golf is a big thing, I think, and I think more people need to do it. We're probably, like I've said in the past, we've got a chance to kind of do that, even if it's within the state that we're in, and we might not be able to cross borders so much. But there's so many things you've just touched on in those 3 states alone. How many different courses you've experienced and different types of golf you've experienced. I think it's fantastic, mate. I
was just wanting to touch on one thing you just mentioned there. The camaraderie, the vibe, the atmosphere in country golf clubs is sensational. You rock up as a visitor to play, be it their Saturday comp or a Wednesday comp or whatever. Everyone, without exception, I've been to, just make you feel so welcome. Typically, you know, if you're hitting it off or not with them, if they start sledging you after 4 or 5 holes. And that happens most times. But a lot of those country golf courses do it tough, and a lot of them rely so much on volunteers, and it's amazing as you travel around the country to see how many hours individuals put in to get golf courses where they are now. And they do play a really, like any sporting club, the golf courses play a really big part in the community in terms of, you know, getting people off the streets, giving them mental breaks, et cetera, et cetera. So I reckon it's a really good cause to support country golf clubs. So I'm big on people getting out of the city and playing golf in the country, because you'll see lots of different stuff, you'll learn lots, and the country courses need support.
Oh, they do, and like you said, they run off the smell of an oily rag more often than not. And I don't think playing golf regularly in the city we have any appreciation. And even I'll be honest, even I forget until I go out west and catch up with friends that I've known for years gone by in the central western New South Wales, and they might have 2 or 3 staff, but that's significantly less than 12 or 14. looking after 18 holes, and you sort of go, that's right, I remember that. And I even used to maintain some courses with minimum staff, and you go, Jesus, they were tough times. That was a difficult a year or 2 years or whatever it might have been, and these guys are just doing it. That's their every day, and there is never going to be a change to that. That's what they do. That's what they signed up for. And as players and members that frequent those courses, that's their regular version of golf.
Yep, absolutely.
It's quite a stark contrast. I'm just talking about it, mate. I'll ask you, in terms of, because I'm always interested to hear what a golfer experiences and thinks about how a course is presented and what it takes. And you just touched on, conversations, no doubt you've had with some of those helping out on courses and things. Have you learned much? I don't know what you knew before you started traveling. Have you learnt much about how different that is for a course that's run solely on volunteers, what it takes? How proud are those volunteers that look after those courses about their golf course?
Yep, it is a really interesting topic. I mean, you see a bit of a snowball too. If you see a small number of people who get in and give some hours up and get the course sort of on the uptick in terms of improvement of condition, and then others jump on that on that trail and you can see some real improvement. But I don't think there's one country course that I've come across in this Tassie trip where I haven't seen a good core of volunteers who helps out, even with the courses. Ulverston might be the odd exception because it's a bit bigger. No, that's not right. They have a good core of volunteers as well. They might have only one or two on the staff there. So it's obviously it's about priorities, Steve. When they've got a limited number of hours that they're putting into the course, there's a heap of things which can't get attention. So they focus on the important things, the condition of the greens, the fairways, etc. And there's a lot of them where the condition of the bunkers is, might not be so great. So you can see where they've had to prioritise and some of the things they've had to leave out. But that's what you get playing country golf. And I think that from my point of view, the thing that excites me when I go to any golf course, which suits my travels of playing so much in the country, the thing that really appeals to me is seeing something different, seeing that magnificent aesthetic that we're talking about up at Rosebery and Tarraleah, seeing these quirky designs, seeing some strategic layouts which you can tell what the designer was trying to do to get you to play, to take on the risky lines, etc., etc. That excites me. Yeah, sure, I love playing on the carpet-like fairways at a Metro and the greens like you play at Royal Adelaide. Everyone loves that, and give me that every time I go out. If you had Nirvana, but I think the thing that excites me most is going to a little place where you're not expecting much, and you think, wow, how good's this? And a lot of the time, I don't think some of those people in those country towns appreciate how good their tracks are.
No, and I think you're quite right. I think from a point of reference is that they haven't had the opportunity. They don't get the opportunity to go and travel, into Hobart, for example, or over to Adelaide and say, hey, knock on the door of Kooyonga. Oh, how are you guys going? What things can we pick? They're not comparing. They don't have a relative reference point. They are just doing what they know and doing it to the best that they can. And
you're spot on. One of the blokes I spoke to here in Tassie, who was one of 3 or 4 people who looked after the course, all volunteers, and he said, I'm responsible for the greens. I've been doing it for a while. Don't really know what I'm doing. Trial and error. I seem to be getting better at it each year. And he and contrast that to some of the resources and dollars that others have at their disposal, and you can see the variation, and you get, and obviously the end product's going to be pretty different when you're looking at something like that.
But I think it's good to hear that that's something that's still there. I mean, for me, that's a reference point from a few years ago, traveling. But it's still there. It's still what happens. And whether we're talking and referencing a place like Coober Pedy or a roughie like White Cliffs, it's still a golf experience. That's still the people that live there. They've got some respite for recreation to give their brains a mental rest. Yep. And go out there and some friendly competition, a bit of banter. And I've said this before, it's a means of escape when you're isolated within where you are, without having to drive for 6 hours to get somewhere of any size. That's a relief. That's a break, and I think that's their version.
Yep, spot on. Couldn't agree with you more.
It's and I think it's great that we get a chance to, like you said, they're often very accommodating, welcoming people. They love the fact that people come to visit, and there's the thing I like about golf is more often than not, you find everyone's on the same level. If you play better golf or not so good golf, it doesn't matter. You're still a person out there enjoying the sport. And when you're playing in the country, especially, everyone's on the same level. You're just out there to enjoy it, and you're visiting. You're a guest of the town, if that's the right way of saying it.
Oh, absolutely. And that one of the beauties and uniqueness of our sport is that, Tiger Woods can play with a 32 handicapper and supposedly they could have almost an even game on the handicap, and they can play in the same group.
That's right, and probably never has it been more relevant that we might be able to play on a level with Tiger.
Yeah. No, it really is a great experience to flit around from country course to country course and spend time with the people playing in your Saturday morning or your Wednesday comps. It's great fun. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I'm curious. Have you got a bit of a surprise packet? One in each state, perhaps, or something that, and you might have mentioned them already. It's a course you go, we've driven through this environment, we've come to this location. I got out of the car and I just went, what just happened? This is incredible.
Yep. Okay. So Tassie, those two courses I talked about in the west, Rosebery and Tarraleah, would vie for my biggest surprise. I might go for Rosebery, which is probably just on the aesthetic, just by a short nose over Tarraleah. So mining town, I don't know, about 1,000 people left in it, I think, and that's one of the courses where there's two or three volunteers who look after it, and it is just a spectacular setting with these massive trees bordering every hole. It's not like ultra narrow, so there's plenty of space, but the aesthetic is beautiful. And that's the one where with each hole you just understood that not only the designer knew what they're doing, but even those volunteers in terms of preserving some of those strategic elements where the grass should be longer and the grass should be shorter. They've done a good job on doing that, which Tarraleah did as well, mind you. So Rosebery by a short half head over Tarraleah, and Penguin, which was also a quirky little 9-holer on the northwest coast, was a ripper as well. So that'll be my surprise packet there. South Australia is a bit harder for surprise packet because I've played so many of them. I mentioned Millicent. Probably the biggest surprise packet for me was a course called Sandy Creek, just out of the Barossa, just between Adelaide and the Barossa. Of course, it's been around forever, and I'd heard about it as a kid, but I'd never played it. And it is, again, aesthetically brilliant with heaps of gums and what have you, but the layout is what struck me. And off the top of my head, I can't remember the designer, but I do recall on the day kicking myself that I hadn't played here as a kid. So Sandy Creek got my surprise there.
There you go. And
in New South Wales, I only played a dozen or less than a dozen. I played 9 courses, but that main Broken Hill course, that is like a oasis out there on the western side, I think it is, of Broken Hill. It's a beautiful looking thing with that red against the green, and it's a pretty good layout as well. I understand at the moment it might be closed to visitors as they battle the how they approach the pandemic, but it is that's my little surprise in New South Wales, that main Broken Hill course.
There you go. Yeah, no, I believe I have heard they have made it closed, I think, to visitors, but they are dealing. It's in a very isolated town out there, and they're dealing with it in the way that they feel is the right way. And but everyone does it differently. So, but interesting, you mentioned Sandy Creek down there in the Barossa in South Australia, because I had been told about Sandy Creek, and I'd looked at it on Google Earth a number of times, and I thought, wow, this looks really intriguing, and looked at their website and some things. So that's an interesting one, that if I get down to the Barossa, I think I will certainly be visiting Sandy Creek.
Yeah, that one in Tanunda, which is down the road, which is in the heart of the Barossa. That's a great track too. Is that my mother-in-law lived in Tanunda in the 90s, and it was a scrape sole course surrounded by these massive old gums, and I think she was on the committee there, and I thought, wow, this place has some potential, and they've taken that potential and built a really good course at Tanunda.
Because it's got a resort next. It's got a resort on course as well. I think Tanunda.
Yep.
So a lovely destination. I suppose it's certainly akin to, and we know how good the Barossa is as a wine region, but they've got a little bit of golf there, like our Hunter Valley in New South Wales, if that's a similar sort of scenario comparison as well. So very interesting. Mate, I one of the other points, you reached out to me and mentioned after I had a podcast episode a couple ago, I was talking about different grass types and where those grass types are utilised on a golf course. And you sort of reached out to me and said, Steve, I listened to that podcast, and it sort of got me thinking a little bit more and asking a couple of questions. I'm curious how that sort of worked for you. What did that mean when you go out and play on a golf course, about hearing how different grasses are used in different climates and in different parts of the golf course? What is it that you're able to, I suppose, look at a little bit differently now than you once did?
I suppose that conversation you and Nathan had filled a few gaps in my knowledge, and there's heaps more gaps to fill. But I suppose being born and bred in first 30 odd years of my life in South Australia, and seeing what grasses were used in the South Australian climate, and then going and traveling and saying, oh, why are they doing this here? Why are they doing that there? It just became obvious to me, different grasses, different climates, why golf courses were doing different things in different spots. And it wasn't so much about me saying, I wouldn't do that. It's perhaps in a number of occasions, courses didn't have that choice, and hence, things at a particular point in time, a particular point of the year, perhaps weren't as good a nick as I thought they might be, through different limitations through grasses and climate, I suppose.
Yep.
I suppose the biggest thing for me was, as a kid growing up with Cooch fairways predominantly, and we were trying to keep kikuyu out of everything, and then especially in country New South Wales, the amount of courses with that kikuyu through the fairways and the surrounds, but how good that actually plays was a surprise to me. And then, as I listen to the stuff that you guys talk about, it makes a bit more sense. And we was like in South Australia, I think, oh no, don't let the kikuyu in, but where the climate is right and they look after it, it's good grass to play golf on.
Yeah, it's nothing wrong with it, and certainly with its level of toughness and how aggressive it is. When you have a couple of good seasons of natural rainfall, it can really spread out and start to cover other areas that the course staff may not be able to try and maintain. And then all of a sudden, you go from having not really much of grass cover in certain areas to having something that's so strong that, hey, regardless of what it is, we've got grass to play on.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes that it does work. It's kind of a lesser of two evils, I suppose, depending on which way you look at it. And other times it's suitable. So interesting stuff.
I had that exact conversation with a guy called Marty Doyle, who is one of the pros at the National, has been at Long Island for a few years, and I think Marty almost won the 2003 Australian Open at Moonah Links. But anyway, he New South Wales country born and bred, I think, and he had sort of impressed on me that he was not sure why more courses don't use kikuyu because of the exact attributes you were talking about.
Yeah, for a lot of clubs, I should say, and courses that may have funding, and we can, try and manage and weed out, if you like, kikuyu or remove it and start growing across a nice cooch cover if that's what's preferred. Because I suppose at the end of the day, we're getting picky. Really, that's what it comes down to. We have the money in certain clubs to be picky, but you talk about country. There is not an opportunity to be picky, especially depending on what Mother Nature's going to deliver. So I think, it comes down to budgetary costs. It comes down to what you can maintain. There's so many different things involved in just the differences of those two grasses. And look, some of the cooches are as drought tolerant as kikuyu are as tough, but I don't know that anything is quite as aggressive as kikuyu and the speed at which it can grow and creep. But that's another ball game. But one of the ones that you mentioned to me at the time was a little bit about the green surfaces there in Tassie, what you've experienced in some of the cool.
Well, predominantly bent. A couple of fescues in the last couple of courses I played. Ratho's got fescue on their greens.
There you go.
Yeah. Yep.
Very interesting.
But the bent, which is what I've experienced mostly in South Australia as well. On most of the courses I've played here, they have one of two or three different bent varieties.
Yeah. Okay. Very good, mate. We'll move away from the grass side of things, and I'm curious as we close out what's been always a wonderful time catching up about your travels. Mate, tell us you mentioned you're going to spend some time in Tassie. What's looking forward post Christmas and New Year and catching up with family? Where do you have next to travel to over the next, I'm not even going to guesstimate how many months because you're just on the road.
Yep. So another 3 months in Tassie where we'll obviously get to play Barnbougle, play the Launceston, Hobart courses, get to do more of the East Coast and down south. So we've got 3 more months of that. And then that's about as planned as we get.
That's about it.
Leave Tassie, spend a short time in Melbourne, seeing the family, and then broad plan is to head up the East Coast. So get up into Queensland before winter sets in. So that's our plan. But that's about as broad as it gets. Who knows? We could end up in WA.
That's a loose plan at best. It's like this is what we're thinking, and if we decide to change, well, it's not really a change because nothing's set.
You got it. That's how we roll. Yep.
Wherever we roll, mate. Look, I'm sure you're going to. No doubt when you go, I can't wait to see what your thoughts are on Barnbougle. I experienced it for the first time earlier this year, and I'm really interested to hear what people think and what they thought about it post their visit to Barnbougle. Do you know if you're going to spend a couple of days there at Barnbougle playing the courses, or is it just a one-off, do you think, for each course?
I don't know, mate. I think they'll probably play them a couple of times each. I have had the privilege of playing at King Island at Cape Wickham and Ocean Dunes, and I was blown away by Cape Wickham.
Wow.
So my expectations are high. I've read so much about Barnbougle, obviously, but I still have that experience of Cape Wickham firmly at front of my mind, and that was magnificent. So, really looking forward to that.
Oh, there you go, mate. Look, I'm sure you're going to find some wonderful courses, and as always, I certainly look forward to seeing where you're travelling to and seeing the photos and chatting to you about bits and pieces along your journey, mate. Look, I'll finish up and say we're really looking forward to it. We're excited by where you're travelling to next, and we wish you a Merry Christmas and wonderful travels and a safe and happy New Year, mate, catching up with family, and wish you all the best as we continue to follow your journey. Thanks again for being on the podcast, Tony.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Great to speak with you as always, pal. Merry Christmas to you.
No worries. Cheers, mate. We'll talk soon.
Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did with Tony. Really insightful and interesting to hear about some of the places he's travelled to in the last 8 or 9 months or so you heard us talk about since I spoke to him earlier in the year. Look, it's really good and interesting to hear about these sorts of stories and travel experiences from people. And Tony's certainly really living it up and playing some fantastic golf courses and stumbling across some really interesting, sensational experiences. And I know I can't wait, certainly down in Tasmania, to find some of those little courses that you just, you really want to go and discover for yourself. Really interesting and really insightful. So thank you, Tony. I really appreciate your time, and I'm certainly going to be, keeping tabs on Tony, and I hope you do too, and through his social media channels to find out where he's traveling to next into the year 2022. I'm going to say you have yourselves a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Enjoy your time with family and friends. Stay safe in wherever you're traveling to in and around the country, and possibly overseas for some of you. But look, as always, you hit them clean. We'll keep them green. Enjoy your golf. Most of all, have a great deal of fun with everyone. And I will catch up with you in 7 days' time with another interview of Australian Turf Analysis, Keeper of the Greens. Merry Christmas.